Welcome to the Twice Over Movies podcast. If you're new here, check out our website at thetwiceover.com to get a better understanding of how we do our movie reviews. Our goal is to provide insight on elements of a movie which you consider more or less important, so that our scores are never misleading. Remember to follow us at the Twice Over on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and support us on Patreon.
Hey!
Hey, man.
Hey.
Step around.
Oh, okay,
Jump in.
Just barely saw you there underneath that crazy hat of yours. This door's a little tricky. There you go. Up in. That's Rainey.
Hi, Rainey.
Yeah, I'm ready.
I'm Jan.
Hi, I'm Alex.
Alex in the hat, huh?
Yeah, no
Yeah.
shit, man.
Welcome everyone to the Twice Over Movies podcast. I'm your host Faraz.
And I'm your host, Fahad.
Okay, today we're discussing Into the Wild, a 2007 film directed by Sean Penn. One of my favorite films. I selected this movie to get this podcast off the ground. Fahad, it's also a movie that we've both seen before, so when we watched it for this episode, it was at least our second viewing.
That's correct. I think we both watched it in our college days. We were both about 22 and now in our 30s. This movie's a little bit different, right?
I think I watched it. Oh yeah, I would have been a freshman in college when I first watched it. But
Okay.
when I first met you, yeah, I had already seen it, which was like my sophomore year.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Well, so you had already seen it too. We're the
Yeah.
same year. All right, so Fahad, let's get right to the scores. I really am interested to see how you scored this movie, even though I know you generally like it, and I know you know that I like it a lot too.
Right.
But this is the first time where I guess quantifying how much we like it.
Yeah. The first time we're critically looking at the filmmaking, right?
Yeah, true. All right, so I want to start with the direction and the plot, the
Okay.
story, etc.
So I give it a score of 70, which
All
is
right.
low average. I thought the film suffered from the nonlinear storytelling. It really gets in the way of telling his story from like in a pretty easy to see way. I didn't see how the nonlinear storytelling added much value. I thought organizing the movie into chapters was a little bit questionable. What were those? Some of those chapters was like family, adolescence, manhood, something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like I was saying, the clarity kind of suffered because of the nonlinear storytelling. I do want to give Sean Penn some props for using Eddie Vedder to do the music for the movie. I thought that was a definite plus. All the other categories for directing, thought it was about average. What'd you think, Bros?
Okay, so I give it a slightly higher score than you. I give it an 80. I agree. This is a pretty simple plot. So, okay, fine. I mean, I get what your criticism is, but it's a simple plot to make it a little more interesting for an audience. I feel like if you didn't have that, the sequences of him already in Alaska and then cutting back to him on his way to Alaska, if it was just, watching him straight from getting or leaving college, going towards Alaska and getting to Alaska and then his days in Alaska, I think it would have been much slower of a movie and much more difficult to keep an audience engaged. So I like the part I like that Sean Penn decided to.
Okay, so you like the organization into chapters of like the themes, right?
Yeah, and
Okay.
I mean, my general thing is, okay, I gave it an 80. It's a simple plot. I mean, it's also based off a true story, so maybe he's trying to keep some like element of realism in it. It
Okay.
is engaging. I felt connected. I didn't find it boring. There's not much happening again, but like
Mhm.
the actor, like the acting in general plays a role in that.
Oh,
So
of
does the
course.
writing.
And so, speaking of engaging, right? Do you attribute that to the direction, or do you attribute that to the subject matter? Because I thought it was engaging because of the subject matter, not necessarily
Uh,
the direction.
no, I mean, so there's two things. This is what I'm saying. I think the acting plays a role in it.
Uh-huh.
And I don't think the subject matter is all that interesting. If you think about it, it's very simple. Here's a dude that just wants to get to Alaska. To make the process, I guess, engaging or even exciting, it's hard to do that if you went like a pure linear method.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'm not giving like a 90 or a 100 or something,
Yeah,
but I did think it was above average. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was good.
that's fair. What'd you think of the writing?
Okay, so for the writing, I gave this a 90. I really love the writing in this movie. I thought it was very profound. And now I think I told you this
Mm.
yesterday, when I texted you.
Yeah.
It was kind of cheesy now as an older adult watching it, but it was still profound. Like there was still something to take away from like every conversation. The narrations were great. So I did give it a 90 because it this is the stuff that really keep me engaged. The acting, the writing, all that
Mhm.
stuff really kept me engaged, and this is why I gave the direction a slightly higher score than you too. Is because I think the director's job is to make it cohesive and make it work together in a way where the audience can connect. What did you give it?
So the writing, I gave it a score of 75. I really wanted to give it a higher score. I feel like in moments the writing was like a 90, and in other moments it was like a 65, 70. Um,
Can you
so
define those moments? Would you say the conversations were around average for you?
right, the conversations I felt somewhat were forced. It was too much of Chris's inner thoughts making its way into a dialogue, and it felt kind of forced there. I also had a problem with some of the voiceovers. So the voiceovers told from Christopher's perspective, with his quotes, with his ideals. I thought they were a little bit out of place. There wasn't much context to what was going on in the background of the film. They were just kind of like thrown in there, like thrown in there. Maybe not the right word, but they weren't done justice. I thought the voiceovers by his sister, her perspective I did like because that told the story of the family he left home and of their troubles getting over Chris's departure.
Well, I definitely agree with you there. The Kareem's narrations are they're so significant to the movie. They provide so much and add so much to the movie because it really gives you depth into Chris's character, really, and then you get to understand why he has, I guess, the ideals he
Hmm.
has, or I guess the perspective of those ideals that he has.
Yeah, definitely
So
agree.
I thought her narrations really helped the movie
And
progress.
you couldn't tell that from the narrations of the sister that he was loved in his family.
All right, so next one, let's talk about the acting then. I'll go first. I give the acting an 80. So the character or the actor that plays Chris, Emil Hirsch, he does a fantastic job. And since he's on the screen for like, I don't know, like 99% of the movie, it's a good watch. It's believable. And his character has like a lot of charisma when it comes to interaction with other people. So just the
Mhm.
way he and the other actors played off of him, I thought was pretty good. So I thought it was definitely above average, so I gave it an 80. What about you?
I gave it an 85. I agreed with all the points he made. Emil Hirsch comes across as very charming. His interactions with a lot of the other characters, like Vince Vaughn's character, he was the farmer for the cropping project he was on. Their interactions were great. Jenna Malone's acting as a sister, that was great. I thought the most standout performance, besides Emil Hirsch's performance, was Catherine Keener. Her portrayal of Jen, the what would you call her again? The rubber tramp. I think she nailed all of her bits of heavy dialogue. All of her emotions were on point.
Yeah, she did a great job for sure. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's mainly Emil Hirsch because he's on screen, and then
Mhm.
everyone is like playing off of him.
Right.
And since he's successful in doing what he's doing, it just helps everyone else too. Like it never felt like to me the conversations. I mean, you said the writing felt a little forced to you at times.
Mhm.
I mean, to me, it just came off really authentic and clean because the way Emil Hirsch played Chris made it seem so believable that
Mhm.
it felt like you were watching someone with real, genuine thoughts, and he was sincere in his display of it. So it came off as clean to me.
None of it felt pretentious, especially as he like espoused some of those heady quotes. Right. It could have come across as pretentious, but and on
Yeah,
multiple,
and
but it
even
didn't.
like
Yeah.
when he's kind of, I guess, getting a critical feedback on what he's doing, on just going to Alaska or not talking to his parents or whatever,
All
he
right.
plays it off really well. Like he's not becoming defensive, and at the same time, he's not becoming aggressive to say like, "No, I know what I'm doing." He
Oh, in
just
terms of defensiveness, yeah, yeah, he didn't
yeah,
come across
because
that way.
I mean, at times I think we'll talk about this later in the discussion part because I don't want to give away any spoilers. Well, let's just go on to the next category now. I want to talk about Let's talk about the cinematography now. I gave this a 95. I mean, this is just a beautiful movie. I'm pretty sure a lot of this was shot on site. It's almost like watching a BBC documentary on nature or something. And it's easy to get lost in the natural beauty. There's a ton of shots, like the golden hour shots at sunset or sunrise.
Hmm.
And even when you have shots that are not, I guess, so much quote unquote natural, like they're in the city or urban areas, even those are very well done. They're placed very well. And the contrast between the two is comes off very clean. So, and I mean, it comes off in the sense that the it helps push the themes of the movie as well. So I
Okay.
thought it was really well done. So I give it a 95.
This is going to be the biggest departure from your score. I gave it a score of 75. I thought it was just average. I get what you're saying. The nature shots were great and everything, and it helped to tell the backdrop of the story and whatnot. That was fine. But I didn't find anything remarkable about it enough to give it a score higher than 75. I noticed there was a lot of handheld photography, which worked fine for this movie. A lot of grainy film was used. A couple of odd angles were used for the intros as the scene started. Some quirky choices also. Do you remember the scenes where they introduced the couple that was living on the Colorado River? Their faces
Yeah.
were all zoomed up. That was kind of
Yep.
was interesting.
I mean, there's some shots for sure that I'm like, even like when he's on the Colorado River,
Uh-huh.
when he first gets into the river and there's like the rapids, and it
Oh, that
just
was
like goes with like a
beautiful.
slow
Yeah,
motion like GoPro hero shot or something, and like
yeah.
that was kind of lame, but
Oh, you thought it was lame? I thought it was pretty exciting.
uh, I mean, it kind of that's the kind
Yeah.
of when I say like consistent under like the category,
Uh-huh.
like that didn't feel consistent with the rest of the movie.
Oh, okay.
Like it just felt like a departure from that.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, I still liked it a lot. 90. I mean,
Yeah.
this is a good looking movie. Watching this like on a 4K TV, it's just pleasant to see. It's good for the eyes.
All right, all right.
But I'm surprised to give it that low. I mean, it's not a bad score, but like I would have thought it'd at least be around the 80s.
I don't know. It didn't to me it didn't look that pretty. I noticed a lot of graininess. I thought that worked fine. I'm not going to criticize it for that. It just worked.
All right, let's go to the next category. This is also a very high score for me. Themes and motifs. I give it a 95. This is a coming of age film in a sense, right?
Right.
And I'm a sucker for those. I don't know if we've done a movie like that
Oh, we
for
have.
the
I think we
podcast yet.
have. Yeah, yeah. We both give these types of stories high scores for that.
Yeah. I mean, the themes that come across with these kind of movies, they just resonate with me for whatever reason, even though I'm not like of that coming of age like demographic anymore.
Mhm.
But the ideas of adventure and for Chris particular, morality, greed, hypocrisy, innocence, and then just nature and all of these elements are present within the film. They're all, I mean, I wouldn't say they're really subtle. They're actually pretty in your face about it. They're well defined, but they're very important to the film. And I think the takeaway is pretty strong because of these themes. Like it's something
Mhm.
you can actually discuss and talk about or think about after you finish watching it. So a 95 for me.
All right. I gave it a score of 85 for those exact same reasons. Um, Great themes. It's a coming of age story, so I wish I could identify more with it, but when I first watched it, yeah, definitely coming of age story for those reasons. I would have given it a score of like 100, 110 if possible. Uh,
Yeah, see, like back then I would probably give it 100 straight up.
yeah.
I'm also like giving these scores in a way if I was watching it for the first time. It also depends on when you're watching. If your first time is watching it as like a 40-year-old man, it's not gonna be the same as it would be as a 16-year-old. I was gonna say like we're not too far off. I guess our writing scores are a little off, in our theme, or sorry, our
Photography and
cinematography.
cinematography, yeah, that was the
Yeah,
biggest departure.
those two are a little. Mine are definitely higher than yours. My tally is 88 for this. Your tally is 79. I mean, we both clearly like this movie.
Yeah.
I like it a little more than you.
Let's get into discussion.
Yeah, so this is the spoiler alert, audience. If you haven't watched this movie, go ahead and watch it first before continuing on, unless you don't care. But I think you should care because this is maybe not. I don't know. I feel like the themes and motifs are the things that we're going to discuss heavily. So I mean, we're going to give away spoilers still. Anyway, spoiler alert. everything from now is out in the open. All right,
Spoiler.
Fahad.
Spoiler. Chris dies.
All right.
I feel like the audience would already know this, even if they haven't heard about the story or anything.
Well, Fahad, you know the first time I watched this movie? So yeah, I was a freshman in high school.
Oh,
I didn't know that this was a real story, dude, because the movie doesn't start by saying based on a true story.
oh, okay, gotcha.
So like at the end when they show like the dude's real picture, I was like, "What?" And I Googled it, I looked it up, and I started reading. I'm like, "Oh my God, this was a real person, and now it's his real face. This dude really died out here." I'm like, "Oh my
So it
God."
hit you that much harder.
It
Realize.
only made it that much harder. I'm like, "Wow," because I already was enjoying it like a lot,
Hmm.
and then when I found out it's real, I mean, I'm not even sure. Like, I didn't like go too in depth. So I don't know like what is fabricated for the movie. I assume a lot of his interactions to Alaska is what's fabricated for the movie,
So did you
right?
read the book afterwards?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you didn't. Okay. So I read the book, but I don't remember much of it, so I wouldn't be able to compare it. I assume the book got it right more times than the movie did.
Yeah, you would think because the books were based off his actual memoir, right?
The books
Or
were
like
based
whatever
on John
his journal.
Krakauer's journalistic whatever attempts at telling a story. So John Krakauer, he initially wrote an article in Outside Magazine, and then the
Oh, so
response
that
was that
outside
great.
that article in the magazine
Uh-huh.
came from like Chris's actual notebook, right? His journal.
I don't know what
Didn't it? Like,
exactly was
isn't
the
the
article. I thought it was just more narrating what happened to this kid. Um,
yeah, but like, where did he get his information from? I think it was from
from
actual journals.
okay, gotcha. Following his
I feel like,
timeline and whatnot. Yeah,
yeah,
makes sense.
because I mean, clearly Chris kept a decent record and documentation of what he was doing,
Hmm.
which makes sense considering what he was doing. All right, so is there anything you want to talk about in particular?
Yeah. Why don't you get it started?
Sure. So I'll start with this. We're introduced to Chris. I'm gonna talk about it in a linear structure from the actual starting point of Chris's life rather than how the movie goes about presenting it throughout the movie. So Chris is graduating from college, right?
Mhm.
And we see that he seems to have a really strong, good relationship with his sister, but he has kind of a tattered relationship with his parents. I mean, it's like on the surface level, like there, but he seems to have like real contempt for his parents. Like he's
And that
like,
emerges later.
yeah, he's holding up a lot of anger,
Mhm.
right? So this anger that he's bottling up in himself, is this anger what is pushing him to do what he's doing? And is it like clouding his judgment or his views or his ideals like of the world
Mhm.
because of his parents? Like what did you think?
I thought it what he wasn't just driven by his anger. His sister's monologue kind of hinted at that um, what she previously thought was him just running away from his family and his and the truth that his parents' marriage was like kind of a fraud. His anger stemming from that, she realized at some point after his departure that that couldn't possibly be all that's driving Chris. She mentioned Chris was always as a kid he got into some neighbor's house, so he was always like headstrong, wanted to do whatever he wanted to do. So I thought he was living out his ideals in terms of I know in the movie they mentioned Thoreau, him quoting Thoreau. So Thoreau's whole thing was about self reliance and measuring yourself up, and so I thought that was a major driver for him, getting out there in the wild, living life, being in the wild. You know.
Okay, yeah, I remember that
Um,
that narration by Corrine where she says like she felt like something else was pushing him and not just his anger towards his parents.
mhm,
But the reason I really asked this is because we have all these encounters that Chris comes across. You have Rainey and Jan,
mhm.
the rubber tramps that are basically in an RV on living on the off the road, and then you have, in my opinion, one of the more significant ones, Ron Franz, an uh, older guy who had lost his family earlier in his life,
Okay, okay,
lives by himself,
all right.
and you have these people that kind of obviously embark their wisdom upon Chris, right?
Hmm.
And I mentioned this when we were giving our scores that he seems to like kind of take it in stride, but he doesn't seem to internalize it or apply it to his situation or to himself.
So Ron's whole thing was forgiveness, right? And we saw that towards the end of his life.
Ron's whole thing was forgiveness, and you can say Jan's whole thing was, I mean, especially when she brings up her own son
Hmm.
that she hasn't heard for in like years, and is like, "Hey, do your parents know where you are?" Her son's name was Reno, and like Chris, he doesn't like apply it to himself. He thinks like it's not gonna be something that applies to him. Therefore, he just lets it go. And I'm saying, is it his anger at that point with his parents that he's just not gonna let these things
So you think the anger blindsided him? The anger blindsided him to the wisdom of these people? I can see that.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, you felt like that too, or no? If that is blinding him, isn't that at the ultimately pushing him?
Think he had it in his head to go to Alaska. He was headstrong about getting out there. So I think with these little bits of wisdom, he took it in stride. He didn't really change his goal.
Going to Alaska is the goal. That's cool. But like the idea is why not tell your parents about it? Or why not write to your sister? Or I don't know, like why totally separate yourself?
Yeah, good
And
question.
that's the thing, right? I mean, you can still get to Alaska. I don't think his parents would have been able to stop him even if they wanted to. I don't know. It's just something that I was thinking about after the movie.
Mhm.
It was like
Yeah, it bothered me why he didn't communicate with his sister.
yeah, that bothered me too. Because he's got to know it's painful for her,
Yeah.
and she even says it right in a couple narrations where like once it like got towards Christmas time, like it went from her understanding why Chris was absent
Hmm.
to just being sad about it, or like
Right.
coming to understand why is he not at least trying to reach out only to me
So,
through friends or something.
right. Um, I don't know if I this hasn't come up before, but I thought a lot of what Chris did was selfish. Selfish in the face of his parents, obvious loss. Selfish in the face of the couple that the rubber tramps who brought him into his family. Uh,
Hmm.
even Ron, in his emotional scene, he's like, "Let me adopt you," and Chris is like,
Yeah.
"Let me get back to you when I get back from Alaska." Yeah,
Okay, so I mean, I think we kind of agree on that. Like, so when we're watching this movie, we're supposed to understand that he is, I guess, the hero, but he's also not. I mean, he's an imperfect hero, right?
sure.
Like we're rooting for him, and we understand why he's doing it, but we at the same time he's got like pretty big flaws here.
He's making compromises. He's
Yeah, and they don't necessarily line up with his ideals.
right.
Okay, so what was your favorite encounter or
Ooh,
um
okay. With the
yeah, I guess encounter, because I mean some are like super brief and some are pretty some are brief and some are extensive.
I mean, I liked all of them. Like Vince Vaughn's encounter. He was a farmer. Thought that was funny. Ron's was sad, so I can't say I liked his. Um,
It's sad but it's profound.
yeah, but I don't know.
Because I feel like Chris's main problem is with his father, right? I think more than anything it's his father that bothers him.
Okay.
Like the whole secrecy, having a mistress, having another child or whatever with another woman.
Hmm.
Like I think his problems like stem with his dad.
So if
So like having a good quote unquote father figure come across.
so, you think Ron? I don't think Ron was that because he was much older.
He's much older, yes, but he was a father who lost his wife and kid, right?
Hmm.
So like he definitely Ron is seeing Chris as almost like a. I mean, he calls him. He says you could be my grandson,
Hmm.
but essentially we're talking about like a relationship, like a father son type,
Yeah.
right?
I thought that was mostly one way with Ron. Um,
It
more
is one way.
affectionate.
That's because Chris is selfish.
Yeah, I think Chris was also keeping him a little bit at bay, just because they were so different at completely different ends of their lives, right? Um, But Chris's relationship with the rubber tramp, the guy over there, what's his face? What's his name?
Jan or Rainy?
Yeah, Ray. That's a man.
Yeah,
Okay,
Rainy.
that's the guy. Yeah, he was cool with him. He was chill, even though he was like his father's age. He didn't. Chris didn't hold any resentment towards him. That's partly due to Rainy's hippie lifestyle.
I would assume they were your favorite encounter.
Who, the couple?
Yeah, Rainy and Jan.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, me too. They were definitely the best. I so I didn't even remember the Tracy played by Kristen Stewart
Oh, okay.
encounter the first time I watched it. Like when she came
Uh-huh.
up, I was like, oh, what? I don't remember this part. Yeah, so that was the most forgetful one for me.
Okay.
um, I like the Ron one because again, I thought like they had like really good conversations, like
Yeah.
especially when they're on top of the hill when Ron actually
When he talks about forgiveness.
yeah, the forgiveness stuff and it's I don't know. I thought that was a
Yeah, it's
very good
endearing,
encounter.
right?
It's not as entertaining
Mm.
as the Jane and Rainey one. The only thing I don't like about the Jane and Rainey one, I don't like how Chris is like their savior for like their relationship because it's kind of rocky, right? The first time they meet,
Mhm.
and Chris with his charisma just gets them to love one another once again. That's the kind of stuff that I found a little cheesy on this time.
I thought the relationship was just like, it had its natural ups and downs just because of the position Catherine Keener's character was in. Jane, what's her face?
Jan,
Jan. Yeah, I thought the relationship was all over the place just because Jan was a little aloof because of her loss with her son, and Chris just kind of helped bring some new energy. And for a moment, she forgot about her own son. So I think that helped temporarily. I don't think it helped any long term issues in that relationship. I mean, when we see them later, they seem obviously a little bit happier. Can't tell if that's Chris's effect.
yeah. So okay, one more question for you.
Hmm.
Well, I guess not really a question, but I guess we can discuss it. Do you think Chris reconciles before his death, like in his head at least, with his parents and who he is?
Yeah, I definitely think he does. There's that whole bit about him calling something by its own name. I think I'm getting that quote right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like the message he writes, like the last thing he writes before he just lays down, because he knows he's about to pass away. He signs it
He signs
with
it in
his
his
actual name,
right.
and then like a quote is like by its right name.
Hmm. Okay,
So instead of Alexander Supertramp, it's Chris,
Christopher
whatever his last name.
McCandless. Right.
Yeah, McCandless.
And then there's something else he scribbles in his book. He writes, "Happiness is realized when shared," I believe. And so that
Yep.
alludes to all the people he's met on the road, as well as his parents. Happiness can be realized, yeah, through their company.
Yeah, because he clearly okay. So he obviously he got to Alaska towards the end of winter, beginning of spring,
Hmm.
and I guess he was gonna just spend through fall, right? And before the winter came, he was supposed to go back, but when he was trying to leave, I mean, too much snow had melted, I guess, so the river current was just too strong for him to leave.
Right, right.
And like the journal entries he has before that, and what I mean, he's quoting a lot of authors throughout this narration, especially when he's in Alaska because he has no one to talk to.
Hmm.
The narrations allude a lot to how he's pretty content, right? He's got books, he's got nature, he's living in the wild, and he's really happy. And then I think when we see him write down happiness is best, like when it's shared, or what exactly is it?
The quote.
I think I wrote it down. Oh, happiness is only real when shared. I think he realizes those good times that he had, like no one even knows that he had him. So like, is it real?
Hmm.
Because that's what I thought when he wrote happiness is real when shared.
Hmm.
That he's almost having like a because he even writes lonely before that,
Yeah, I
right?
was just going to point that out. Is it a result of his loneliness towards the last weeks where things are getting a little bit dire? Or was it a result of almost like a realization being out in the wild that that's not truly what he wants? So is it out of
I
desperation or
thought
is
the
it out
second. I thought the latter. I thought it was a realization that
of
he's come to realize now. Like, I mean, I was enjoying it at the time, but how real was it if I couldn't share it with anybody?
Mhm.
That's probably like the main thing that stuck with me, especially as a kid when I watched it, and even now. I mean, like that's the part that like I think about. Is like, yeah, that's like, is that just the point right there of the entire movie?
Hmm. Interesting question. Yeah.
Well, do you think so?
What do you think?
I do. I think that is the entire point because we just talked about how Chris was a little selfish. He comes across all these people. All of these people help him
Mhm.
get to his goal. All of these people at the same time help, like, again, share their wisdom with him and try to help him just beyond the actual goal of reaching Alaska, but help him grow and mature as an adult.
Mhm.
And through that, like I said, he was selfish. Through all of that, maybe at the end, when he's basically on his last days, he's realizing the lesson of all that wisdom.
Okay.
And that lesson is like true happiness is real when it's shared.
Okay. Gotcha.
That's how I
Yeah.
took it. I could be totally wrong, but that taking it that way makes me like this movie more.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I saw it a little bit as a I don't know, as a compromise to his ideals of self-reliance, do it alone, live in Alaska alone, kind of thing. It was kind of
Well, yeah,
like a
that's how he starts. I
right,
mean, that's how he is before his transform.
right. So it's a little bit of maturity towards the end, right? Um, and so yeah, I think if he had lived, a lot of he would have had a lot of more mature moments like that, where he would have realized something, and then I think eventually he would have made amends with his parents, gone back, gone to law school, done.
Yep. I mean, maybe not go to law school, but I mean, first step would be make amends with his parents, and I guess be real with them. The whole thing is how hypocritical, quote unquote, his parents are with how they present themselves and then who they really are.
Mhm,
And I mean, it's a problem that every single one of us come across every single day. Whether, I mean, hopefully it's not your parents, but like someone you know,
mhm,
even someone you care about, like people like that exist, and it's that's why it's like a relatable thing.
mhm,
So even though I said I'm not really of that coming of age,
mhm.
it's still something you can relate to.
Yeah, true. I wanted to get into what I loved more, the subject matter, which is Chris's story, or the film. And obviously, I love Chris's story, so I'm going to say the story. And I have some real criticisms now that I've watched on the second viewing of this film, or third viewing, just the viewing at this point in my life. The film had some obvious flaws, and I'm going to chalk that up to how it's tough in a film to portray the inner thoughts and emotions of a character well. This movie tried to do it with voiceovers, which mostly did not go over well. Um, and so I thought, in terms of telling the story, that was better done through the book.
Okay, so you like the subject matter more than the movie itself.
I know you haven't read the book, so
Yeah, so I can't like
yeah.
compare it to a book.
But how about just like reading the Wikipedia of his story and whatnot?
I think at the end of the day, the movie is entertaining
Okay.
and it's enjoyable to watch, and it still conveys the
And the
message
feeling,
that
right?
exactly, and the feeling that it's trying to like connect with the audience. So I would say I like the film, and I also like the subject matter. I mean, the idea of, you know, disconnecting from the hustle, the the greed,
Mm,
I don't know, whatever you want to call it, corporate life, and then just go out and live off nature in Alaska, the adventure of that,
yeah.
um, the purity of that in a sense. Like it sounds very appealing, especially as a younger person. Maybe not so much now as it did back then, but it still is
It's
something.
still appealing in like certain
Yeah,
in
it's
in a
still
short
definitely
amount
appealing.
of
It's still
time, right?
something like
If you want to go on
uh,
vacation, I'd really like to just, backpack for a couple weeks, go across. Well,
Yeah, something that I wish I could just do,
yeah,
but, like, I don't have the I guess, the circumstance or the courage to do it. Because honestly, to doing that definitely takes courage.
it does. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't Chris's way. I don't think many people would.
Yeah, I wouldn't give up 24 grand and then burn my money.
Right. And I think that's why Chris's story is unique. He had so many things going for him. He's
Well, that's another thing. This comes back to his anger with his parents and clouding his judgment almost.
mhm,
Like, yeah, you have all this money, but like you also need it. But he also says it to when he's writing to
mhm,
Wayne. He's like, "This is the tramp life is too easy
with money.
with all the money that you gave me."
Mhm.
So, so he almost wants like the struggle or the challenge
Yeah,
that comes with like,
yeah. He wants like that raw experience of like, being able to
yeah.
hustle and like figure things out. Hitchhike and just,
He actually has a pretty good
uh-huh.
quote. I like this quote a lot. Like, I don't need money. It makes people cautious.
Oh yeah, I like that a lot too. It's very true.
And it's
Yeah.
true. It's a yeah, it's a real quote.
But people do love security. I mean, that's like a human um flaw, I guess. Security.
Yeah, I mean, security to a point that it can become irrational almost.
Sure. Oh, what did you find most cheesy in this movie?
Most cheesy.
Mm,
Okay, so honestly, it was I mean, I wrote this down, but I didn't like table this under cheesiness, but I wrote it down as something I didn't really or particularly thought it was like I don't know. I didn't like how it was done.
mhm,
So when Chris comes back to the US cuz he accidentally gets all the way into Mexico
mhm.
through the Colorado
Oh,
River.
he's telling his story to the border agent?
No, no, no. So he's past the border. He's back in LA now.
Okay.
And that one night in LA when he's going to a homeless shelter, he needs a bed for the night,
All right.
but he decides to like go out for a walk and they have like those like shots of I don't know, homeless people out in the street,
Uh-huh.
I guess illicit activities happening and he's just like
He's kind of alienated.
and then they have like the way that they're presenting the shots with like the music I didn't like. I thought that was cheesy. Random stills to like
Uh-huh.
show him kind of out of his element, I guess,
Okay.
right? And I didn't like how they did that. And I'm a person who loves urban areas and like cities. Like when I go on vacations and stuff,
Uh-huh.
I love just going to like the city
Uh-huh.
center and just chilling there like at a cafe and like people watching or something. It's something I enjoy. And
Chris was
in
completely
this
alienated
movie,
from that, right? From the city.
yeah, and is presenting it and like he's is presenting um urban life or city life, urban society as almost like a plague or a disease on this earth.
Ah,
And I mean,
that's
nature is
interesting.
beautiful and it obviously is amazing, but it's also the point of view from Chris, and maybe that's just how it's just showing us more and more how Chris
Mhm.
does not fit
Mhm.
in this type of life.
Yeah.
I just thought it was a little cheesy the way they did it with the still shots and the music and
What was it specifically?
I mean it's a sequence of shots. So it's okay, so remember when he asked for a bed at the homeless shelter
Mhm.
and then he leaves the homeless
Yeah, he
shelter.
puts his, belongings in a locker, and then he's out in the
Yep.
streets, and there's
Yep.
a homeless crowd hanging around in a dimly lit street.
Yep. You don't remember how like it randomly would have like a still?
But you also mentioned voiceovers, which you found cheesy, and completely agreed. I thought they could have got his inner thoughts out in a way that wasn't a voiceover, and that would have been better for the movie.
I mean, most of his own voiceovers, I thought most of his voiceovers were mainly quotes, like of his own reading material.
Yeah, and you're supposed to try to understand the character, right? Through those quotes. Like, what is
Hmm.
it exactly that he's pursuing? I thought that could have been done either through dialogue or I don't know. I'm not a director, so I wouldn't be able to tell you how, but through a voiceover is really was really tacky. Do you remember that scene where he looks at some like into a bar and he sees himself talking to someone?
Yeah, it's in LA too, right? I think that's like just during the day before the homeless shelter. He's just out in like downtown area and he looks into it's like a happy hour or something
It's like
happening.
people his
And
age and
yeah, like his face gets superimposed on some like douchebag networking.
yeah.
Yeah, that was a little cheesy too. We know who Chris is at this point. Like they don't have to like
Tell us.
make it so obvious. Like they don't have to like show it to us over and over again. But that's the stuff I still like I caught on this time around. First time watching it though. I don't like remember any of that stuff. Even the whole Tracy relationship with the Kristen Stewart's character. It's not really cheesy, but it was pretty
Tracy who?
unnecessary. Tracy was a guitarist that he meets the second time he comes with Jan and Rainey,
Gotcha.
and like it totally didn't help the story in my opinion. It just happened to be another person that was impacted by
I
him, I
thought it
guess.
weaved into the story this way. Well, if it's based on if this is a true account, then it's fine to leave it in. But I thought it weaved itself in this way. Catherine Keener's character Jen, she's talking about the age in which she had her son, right? And then
Oh yeah, true. And it's the same age that Tracy
it is,
is at pretty much.
yeah, and he becomes a little bit defensive of her, like she doesn't want to be with him. She needs to grow up a little bit, right? And
Hmm.
he's moving her towards like the platonic relationship instead of like the she's obviously attracted to him, and he's like kind of like, hey, cool it, let's just be friends.
Yeah. Like you're way too young.
Yeah,
All right, I think we're good, right,
I
Fahad?
think so too.
Nothing really else to add.
No, did you hear that song that they
I
sung
w-
together? I thought that was really cute.
that was pretty good. Yeah. Again, that's like one of those things where Chris's character as like this charismatic dude just played off really
Mhm.
well. Like he didn't just, I mean, he kind of just rejected her not too much before that, but he's like, hey, look, we're still cool, right? And then we'll do this. We'll play a song together. All right, everyone, thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening to this production of The Twice Over. If you haven't already, subscribe and follow wherever you get your podcast, and remember to support us on Patreon or by sharing the podcast with a friend. Feel free to contact us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at The Twice Over, or email us at comments@thetwiceover.com. All of the music you heard is from Amerigo Gazaway. Check him out on Bandcamp and Spotify.